recording.
Yeah.
So we're recording.
Nice.
You want to do the clap?
Okay, do the clap. Wasn't the loudest, but it's fine.
It's good.
Getting there.
It's not as good as the last one, but yeah.
Tim,
Mike,
how are you doing?
I'm good. We're back.
We're back, episode 3.
Yep. Did we skip a week? No, I think we recorded last week.
No, we edited last week. And last week we got the Instagram live and we got the first episode up on YouTube that all of our amazing viewers and subscribers went and watched.
Thanks all for following us and subscribing. And if you like our content, spread it to friends that you think might also like the content. So,
indeed.
Yeah.
I think a good segue is to also mention how we'll be putting some shorts and some clips from the podcast up on Instagram. So if there's any interesting topics, then it makes it easier for people to share with others and engage.
What do you think? Yeah, I think also maybe it's to tease a bit what we talk about more, like in the long form content.
Of course. I mean, I recognize myself that I'm very interested in podcasts, but there's a lot of podcasts out there that are all very long and we all will have very busy lives. So a lot of the time I will see a snippet of a podcast on Instagram Reel or YouTube Shorts that'll then make me interested in watching that part of the podcast or the whole podcast.
Yeah. Hopefully that does the same to our followers or subscribers.
Let's see. Time will tell.
Let's see. So do you want to go back and check what we talked about so far in the first and second episode?
Yes, I think as this journey continues, we will hopefully gain more and more viewers. And so I think at certain points, it's nice to have a bit of a checkpoint to go back and to review what we've been talking about and what we plan to talk about.
Ooh, I'm just remembering that I saw something on Instagram as well, that instead of a summary, you can also make a mind map.
Yes.
Maybe that's even better for this, right? So we can actually map out which topics we had and when we're circling back and how
there must
connect.
be some AI software out there that will help us with it.
I'm not going to do it myself. It's going to be AI.
There we go. It's the world we live in. Yeah. Just so our viewers know, in 3 or 4 episodes time, we're not even going to be here. It's all just going to be AI.
Yeah. We have enough footage by now to just automatically generate.
Yeah. But for us, for now, they're just still stuck with us. So bear with us for another few episodes.
Yeah. It won't take that long. No, but I think that makes a lot of sense. So let me just check. The first one we just discussed basically on what we want to talk about, the topics, philosophy, psychology, self-improvement, and life's biggest questions. Overcoming challenges. Yeah, also about starting up the first recordings in 2024. We talked about that.
Yeah.
The difference between, or the balance between being and doing as a human being. We talked about that. Jungian psychology, shadow work, human needs. Not that we discussed them in depth, but we touched upon those as being.
And you recently did a video on the shadow, right?
Yes. I did my second video on shadow work, and I actually recorded another one, which is more like an example of how I did shadow work. Oh man, that was a nice experience as well.
I think give our viewers a little bit of a teaser for anyone who hasn't heard about the shadow and shadow work. Give a quick summary.
So the shadow is like a psychology term that's coined by Carl Jung. So it's basically about, let's say the shadow is the part of you that you are unconscious of. And usually it triggers you or it makes you do things that you are not even aware that you were doing them. Sometimes you realize them through reflection by other people, and sometimes you get triggered by your own response that you did something that you felt like was completely out of character or that's very different from how you see yourself. And shadow work basically means that you try to discover what that part of yourself is and come to terms with that, realize that it is a part of you.
Yes.
You actually discover more of yourself. So I also talk about that in my video. There are 2 steps to shadow work. One is identifying the thing that is completely other than you. So like I discussed, you responded in a certain way. For instance, for me, it was like I responded in an annoyed way to my wife when, like, rationally I was thinking I actually have no real reason to be annoyed or grumpy whatsoever, but I still did it. So it felt like not me.
Yes.
But then you need to deep dive into what was that feeling, and then realize that, oh, there is a part of me that feels like this, that needs to be heard, and then kind of integrate it. So once you learn why you were actually thinking like that, you see there's a different side to you that is not something else, that's you as well. Then you can understand yourself better, you can understand other people better, and you can kind of release a lot of internal tension.
Yes.
So it's a really beautiful way of discovering yourself.
And I think the subconscious is something far more powerful than what most of us realize, at least speaking for myself. I didn't think much of the subconscious until I watched that series with Dr. Andrew Huberman and Dr. Paul Conti. And the reason why that's coming to mind is because there's a very interesting way that he described what you're calling the shadow here, but he was referring to as the subconscious. And he was talking about how, for example, defense mechanisms, which we all have because we're all human. He was talking about the complexity of the subconscious and how these defense mechanisms literally rise up out of this subconscious, the tip of the iceberg, this like huge vat of complexity. And if they're not dealt with, they or even if they are, I mean, we're all human to a certain degree, you can feel them literally rise up from your being into your conscious. And I thought that was such a nice or apt way of putting it, because literally you were saying how sometimes it can seem like someone else completely that's within your own head, and it's like that person's rising up into your thoughts.
It's like possession, basically. You're being possessed. And the way that Jordan Peterson also talks about it is you don't have internal drives, but you have personalities, really.
Yes.
So like, let's say the idea of anger, that's not just like the feeling of being angry, but that's a personality in itself.
But often we also try and suppress these personalities within us because perhaps we were conditioned, or we had some experiences in our past, particularly when we were young, that led us to believe that certain personalities were bad.
Exactly.
So we try and suppress them. And interestingly enough, at least from what I've discovered, the more you try and suppress something, the more it's going to rear its head in other ways, right?
Yes. Yeah, so actually, I should also correct. The unconscious is indeed all the things that we are not aware of. The shadow is the part that we are actually, that is not accepted by society or by ourselves, more or less. So that's like the more repressed or unrecognized part. So usually if you go more into that, in the description of the shadow, usually have certain archetypes that, like, let's say maybe more positive drivers that you can embody or that can possess you, like the king or the hero or the magician. There are some examples. But there are always these shadow versions of it, which is usually an under or over representation of the perfect balance. So let's say if you have the warrior, in essence is someone who protects and is disciplined and these kind of things. Can take action, for instance, is more like the aggressive drive, perhaps, as Paul Conti calls it. But then the shadow version is either you are trying to separate yourself from the warrior, so you think aggression is something bad entirely, so you're suppressing the whole archetype, and therefore you are I think it's like a masochist, so you are letting people walk over you and like extremely pacifistic, so that kind of vibe. Or the other way around, that you are kind of unaware of it, and then it's usually an overrepresentation where that personality takes control without you knowing it because you are unaware, and then it's like the sadist, the thing that's aggressive for the sake of being aggressive, let's say. And those two you can oscillate even between that these states. And that is something that during shadow work, let's say, you could try and find where's the balance here. How can this personality or drive serve me, so, like, serve my higher intentions and not serve itself only. So
to give the viewers maybe a bit more of a practical, real-world example of this, I don't think we've discussed on this podcast, but we discussed on the episode that we did on your channel probably about 2 years ago, that you and I actually met through a talent program at work called the CTP program. And in that program, we learned a lot about people and ourselves. I think it was mainly aimed at professional development, but also touched a lot on personal development, because your personal life or your personal state affects a lot of your professional state. Where I'm going with this is that at that stage, at least in my personal life and in my career, I was learning a lot about myself. And one of the things that I'd learned was that I'm quite conflict avoidant, in that I will try my best to avoid conflict scenarios, especially at work. But if I was, especially back then, backed into a corner and forced to deal with a conflict situation, I would overreact, which I think is sort of that duality that you're talking about now.
For sure, yeah.
And so through discovering that and learning about that, I obviously learned a lot about myself, but then I also overcompensated. And so I think for a very long time, I overvalued. I mean, we've all heard the idea of how important it is to listen, to actively listen. We learned about that in the talent program. And I've got a history of doing debating at school, so my brain would always want to think of arguments or rebuttals to things that people were saying. So I really practiced and tried to train myself to just listen and just not, especially in conflict scenarios, have that knee-jerk reaction to engage and argue. But I think I almost overcompensated when I became a little bit too placid, I think is maybe the right word, where I just wasn't necessarily being myself. I was just being too relaxed and not engaging enough. And so now one of the things that I've been working on, particularly this year, is finding that balance again. So still keeping all the virtues of being able to truly listen and not be the one that says the most in the room. But then when the time comes and when I do need to step in, not have a problem with interrupting someone if they are completely wrong and they've been talking for 10 minutes, getting my opinion heard, getting my opinion across, and then going back into that humble or listening state.
Yeah, I think you do that really, really well, because I think you have, like you said, you have the skill, and it's obvious that you're a good speaker. And then you actually have something to work with. And I think what's key of this development is that before you were speaking for this entity that is a good speaker, or for the sake of maybe speaking a lot or letting your voice be heard. And after that, maybe you were being quiet to compensate for maybe speaking too much, or listening more for speaking too much. But now in the balanced state, you have a higher goal, and that is not speaking or listening, but it's like whatever is necessary for this to have the best outcome. And that, I think that's the main difference between the shadow representations and the balanced version, is that you have a higher goal.
I really like that, because we also spoke about, I think it was in the previous episode, the idea of serving something greater than the self. And at least in a conversation with multiple people, you are indeed doing that. You're all partaking in the act of conversation to serve a purpose higher than my own individualistic goals and your goals. But we're trying to, especially if we work for the same company, we're part of the same team, we're trying to achieve a collective goal. And we also spoke right at the beginning of this podcast about how we wanted to really talk about the complexity of human beings. And I think this embodies that so well, because what we're actually doing in that moment is we're dancing with each other's shadows. Right? The amount that I'm going to engage or be conflict avoidant or willing to engage in conflict or let my defense mechanisms come out or repress them is also dependent on your shadows and me recognizing your shadows. And I can also say I've learned the most about my own shadows through recognizing them in other people.
Yeah, I can see that, because it's usually easier to see it in other people than in yourself.
Yes.
It's very funny because, and that's where I think AI can also help a lot. So what I also recently did was ask ChatGPT to help me with analyzing my shadow. So then it asks you a bunch of questions, you answer as well as you can. And then the summary you get back is like, ooh, I didn't realize that it was like that, but now I see it on paper. It makes a lot of sense, you know. And it's just, if you would tell me the same story about you, I would see it immediately, but it's because it's me. I'm like, nah, you know.
Yes.
It's not like that.
I've seen people talk about doing this on Instagram Reels and stuff, but I haven't done it myself. But one thing that I would like to quickly say, and I definitely told you the story before, but I haven't said it on the podcast, but it was a very much of the aha moment for me, where I worked with a colleague who is quite similar to myself in, I at least think quite similar to myself in personality and these sorts of things. And we worked together for quite a while. And then I ended up moving to another team, so we didn't work together as much. And there was a moment that we had when we reconnected for, I think, just a chat or a coffee or something. And because I hadn't interacted with this person in quite a while, it was a nice opportunity for, let's say, some fresh perspective through this interaction. And I could see that the person that I was meeting with was dealing with something. You know, there was some sort of tension or internal conflict that they were working through. And one of the things that I've worked through a lot in my career, but also as a person, especially these past few years, is this idea of not being enough, not feeling like you're not enough, whether it be through work or whatever it may be. And I think a lot of people go through this in their own unique way, and it's a challenge.
Sure, yeah.
That pushed me to work extremely hard, or to maybe interact with people in not the nicest way, because I was very goal oriented and all these things. But it's something I also recognized in the person that I was meeting, and I recognized through my own journey that part of me not feeling enough was also somewhat rooted in an insecurity or doubts about my own capabilities, and, you know, always wanting to be more. And so I met up with this person, and for 10-15 minutes, this person was broadcasting to me, was trying to convince me of the story that they'd been telling themselves in their head for the past few weeks or months. But because we hadn't connected in a while, and we used to connect so often, it was a perfect opportunity for them to test their theory, because we all know that if we, you know, run something in our own heads, it makes sense to us, but we want to then probe the other person and see. And I could sense in this interaction that this person was essentially wanting my validation, and in other words, a bit insecure about the story that they're told in their heads about themselves and their progression and whatever it was. And in that moment, so you mentioned shadow work, but in that moment, I still remember feeling, because I feel like we're very similar people, I could feel the like shadow of this person like coming up behind them, almost like in Harry Potter, like like literally coming
like a
up,
spirit,
like spirit, and sort of hanging over this person, whether you want to call it the insecurity or the shadow or the whatever it may be. And so after 10 minutes, 15 minutes of this person speaking, it got to the point where they sort of asked me my opinion. So what do you think about all this, you know? And then there was a bit of a silence, and I realized in that moment that essentially I'd been given, like there's that saying, with great power comes great responsibility. I'd been given power. And in that moment, I had one of two choices. I could have used this newfound knowledge about understanding other people, understanding myself, my insecurities, the fear of not being enough, and I could have used it to manipulate them. So I could have gained power over this person by saying, "Are you really sure though?" and poking that insecurity, because it's screaming at me. Or I could engage in a far more, which obviously I did, in a far more caring, understanding manner, and not telling the person what I think they should do, whatever, but just communicating, asking questions, and trying to help and understand. But for me, this was like the first moment that I had in my life where I realized truly how much influence we have on the mental state and the well-being of other people through our conversations, and how the more we learn about ourselves, about being human, about the psychology of human beings, the more we are able to influence other people for better or for worse.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully for the better, like you exemplified in this amazing story. It's nice that you really experienced that. Yeah.
And sometimes it's happened to me plenty of times where after the fact, I've realized that I've maybe influence someone in not the best way because I wasn't aware of it in the moment, right?
Sure, yeah.
And we're all human, so...
Perhaps even like it happened to me at least, that maybe you influence people in a negative way with negative intentions because you were just not your best self at the moment and you were tempted by misusing the power, or like, you know, like just... If you dislike people and you find them in a weakened position, you might abuse that at certain points as well.
Yes.
Like just it's not the best, but I guess it's
and I think one of the ways that we can avoid or try and contain ourselves from doing this, because we're all human and we may even do it subconsciously without being aware, It's something that Jordan Peterson talks about in his book 12 Rules for Life, but also in a lot of his videos, and something that I've really embodied a lot this year is really focusing on telling the truth always, 100%. And so that involves also talking about your own feelings and mental state when you get to the office on a Monday morning and your colleague asks you, how are you? And you go, fine, how are you? You can be like, you know what, like today I'm actually feeling a bit irritable. I don't actually know why, but I'm just irritable, you know. And then all of a sudden you're being true to yourself, but you're also being true to others, and you're signaling to others that, you know, maybe it's not the best day to bring up that topic that's been waiting for, you know, maybe just wait until tomorrow. Today or whatever it may be, you know. Or if you're feeling vulnerable, or if you feel like someone else isn't in their best thing, then say, listen, you know, I'm not gonna bring this up today because I don't think you maybe in your best state of mind or whatever.
For it.
And what I've realized, and Jordan Peterson goes into depth about this, so I'd highly recommend anyone listening who doesn't know about this to research it, but he talks about how always in the moment, it's always difficult to do, right? I mean, anything that's long-term good is difficult in the moment. That's what makes worthwhile things worthwhile. But it's like paying off a debt early. It's like you're queuing less into, like you're doing yourself a service in the future.
It just doesn't work. Like if you're basically untrue to reality, then I like this example of like a ruler that you're bending. At a certain point, it snaps back. And hits you in the face, basically. So you can only bend it that far before you get into trouble. And the thing that I also really like about telling the truth, I think it's like a fundamental necessity for good conversations to thrive also. So very interestingly, I was looking up some stuff about chakras and things, like maybe a very random topic, but I got to the throat chakra, which is apparently the energy pool of the truth, because it's about resonating what you know to be true outwards.
Wow.
So that you can actually, so you're kind of distilling your own truth, and then once you can bring it outwards, you can purify it with other people's truth. And then you can really purify it to what is real. And in a similar way to look at it is, and I haven't gone into that too much, but I told you about John Vervaeke. He is like I think he's also a professor, but he has a lot of YouTube videos about Socrates. And the dialogue that Socrates is always talking about is like, Socrates basically has a lot of dialogues that are written about, not by himself, but someone else wrote about it, that he talked with other people who maybe had completely opposing points of views from him. And they never really get to a conclusion, but they always circle around the real topic, meaning maybe that like truth is not a statement or a set of rules, but it's maybe more like looking at it from different angles, and you get to recognize more and more of the truth. But you can only get that in a truthful discussion, dialogue with someone else. So it's like a lot of words and aspects that I'm bringing in here, but I just really like that fact of telling the truth as well, because it's fundamental. That's
a very interesting topic that you mentioned, because I've obviously mentioned Jordan Peterson a lot here, but he talks about the concept of when you're in an argument with someone that you are close with. So normally in like a romantic relationship, because there's lots of emotions involved, things can get very heated. And he talks about one of the best strategies in understanding someone, or even helping someone understand themselves, is by truly listening to them. We're talking about the art of listening. And then before you reply, try and summarize what they've said back to them, and then see if you've understood because what's actually happening there is, firstly, the person is trying to take all of these conflicting ideas and thoughts that's in their own consciousness, and probably mostly subconsciousness, and as you said, resonate it out through the voice into the real world, which in itself is a very difficult process, because you've got to pick and choose. What do you keep and resonate out, and what do you throw away? So they're doing that process live, which is quite a thing. And then by you trying to bundle it back up, firstly, it shows that you actually listen, which people love.
You have to, otherwise you cannot do that.
But then also, most of the time, especially if someone's trying to figure out something, which a lot of us are because we're all human, whilst speaking, then it gives them an opportunity to kind of hear their own thoughts that back at them, but through a medium that's been interpreted through themselves.
That's really powerful.
And I'm not the best at it. I wish that I could say I've done this with this person at work, and it was I think I maybe have done it here and there subconsciously and stuff, but it's not something that I've consciously used as much as I would like to. But I definitely recognize the power in it.
There are a couple of tricks. I mean, I always need to be careful when talking about conversational tricks, because people might call it manipulative quite quickly, and I can see why. But as a matter of fact, I think this is a very useful trick if you want to be a better listener or conversationalist in general. Chris Voss, the writer of Never Split the Difference, he's like an FBI negotiator who wrote a book.
Yes.
You should read that book.
I think he may have been on the podcast with Diary of a CEO.
For sure. Yeah. He's one of those that went on every podcast as well. But so the best is definitely, like you said, try to actually listen to the other person and then summarize it. That's the best. But there's like a baby step towards it that already works wonders, and that's just, well, he calls it kind of labeling, something like that. Yeah, labeling. And then what you do is you use the phrase like, it sounds like, or it seems like, and then you just give like a statement about what the other person said.
Yes.
And by doing that, you are also signaling, I listened to you.
Yes.
But what might be even better, and you can also use that intentionally, is that you make a wrong statement, then the other person corrects you. And like these kind of things, other people love to like correct you and be right. But then you label it again in the right way, and then they know for sure, okay, now he really listened to me. And that's such a disarming thing, apparently, that you just make people hurt. And like I said, it's like if you use this framework, let's say, instead of trick, it's like a framework to make yourself try and actually listen to what the other person has to say.
Yeah. It sounds like you're trying to mansplain to me.
See what you did there, Michael.
But listening to what you're saying, I think it's very powerful.
It feels a bit gimmicky if you start it.
There's three things that I want to talk about. So the first thing, just looping back around, talking about summarizing. I noticed it very well this weekend. I was watching the Diary of the CEO's latest, Stephen Bartlett, I think his name is, latest video with John Green, the author of 48 Laws of Power. They just did a new episode of this last weekend.
Ooh.
And I was watching it, and he was doing a very good job at summarizing back to John Green. I think it's John Green. Robert Green. Shows you how good I am with my authors. So that was quite an interesting thing. The second thing that you mentioned with regards to listening and then saying it sounds like whatever. So indeed, what you can also do there, which is indeed manipulative and I think wrong, is use that to lead someone into a corner, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty well-known debating strategy. So if you're spitting facts, but maybe they're not the greatest, then it sounds like you're getting your facts from maybe the not most reliable source, Or I think maybe someone like Donald Trump does that a lot, where you speak a bit of an untruth but link it to something that they said and try and maneuver the conversation in your way, and that's obviously not what someone who's looking for the real truth would do. This is just a side comment that I wanted to make. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was definitely something that I have recognized that I do quite a lot subconsciously, and a lot of us do. If you want someone to like you that you're having a conversation with, I think psychologically it's very well known to mirror them.
Yep, mirroring.
And I think mirroring is an extremely, and I've noticed myself do it, and I didn't even know before I heard about the concept, but I would, I don't know, be sitting opposite my manager doing a routine or whatever, and they would pull their chair in, and then I'd pull my chair in. It's just a weird thing that people do.
Yeah. And you can do that consciously in order to strengthen that as well.
Yeah.
And these things, and that's where actually it's funny that you brought up Robert Greene, because he always says he has a lot of rules that people might say are manipulative, but he says it's just the way you use it is up to you.
Yes.
But it's you're just too lazy to learn how to do it, basically, and then you're writing it off as being something evil.
Yes.
But you can also use it for something good and for actually making a better connection with the other human being.
I started reading 48 Laws of Power probably 6 months ago or so, and I didn't get very far. And I think we spoke about it, and at the time, that was my reasoning for it. It seemed like a very manipulative book, and I didn't quite get it. And now, as I've learned and I've gone a bit further into this journey, I've realized, wait a second, you can definitely, with that great power comes great responsibility. You can definitely use it truthfully and purely in a good sense,
And also see what other people are doing, because
Yeah.
they're doing it to you as well, consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah, and you can let it happen, or you can decide to intervene.
Yeah. So this is extremely powerful to know, I think, and that's why, I mean, like, these things have never really bothered me that much. Also, and there are also some very simple things like letting there be pauses in conversation, let's say, so not filling it up.
That brings me on to a very interesting question that I want to ask you, Tim. You mentioned to me that you watched the interview between Donald Trump and President Zelensky.
Yeah.
I only watched a bit of it actually this morning for the first time, and I found that was definitely a conversation where neither party was truly searching for the truth. Very emotionally charged, very difficult conversation. I don't want to trivialize it at all. Of course, the topics involved there are very serious, but I want to ask your opinion on particularly more, not the facts of the conversation or the details of it, but the interactions of how each of the three parties were interacting with each other. There wasn't much pauses. It was very emotion charged. What do you think about that conversation, those sort of conversations?
I think like it felt a little bit like a high school debate, and where one was definitely being a bully, like Donald Trump was bullying Zelensky, and really, I think, throwing low shots. And I was not completely sure what Zelensky was doing. I think he was not prepared for something like that. So he seemed a bit unsure of what to do, but I think he also, he held his own quite well, I would say. I don't know. I think it was just a very awkward and weird conversation, don't you think?
I didn't even watch the whole thing because I think I got it halfway through or so, and I wasn't enjoying watching it, and I didn't continue. But I felt like none of the parties were showing their best. I don't know that JD Trump, or who's the other guy?
Was the vice?
Whoever he is.
I think,
JD Vance or something.
It was so awkward. Yeah,
I don't know him much, but I feel like at all levels, like each of the parties could have represented themselves a little bit better. And it's very interesting because you made a video about Donald Trump on your channel, and I think it's a good example of someone who subconsciously is very aware of a lot of these laws of power, conversational tricks. I think in his case, he is someone who manipulates people and manipulates the systems for what he wants, which may not be a good thing. I don't know. It's not for me to judge. But
I find it very interesting because I feel like Donald Trump is just someone like, I also used to have a PL like that. That's just someone who starts to speak louder when you start speaking.
Yes.
And it shouldn't work.
Yes.
But for some reason he just does it. I guess because he has money or something. I don't know. It shouldn't work. Like every normal human being should say, okay, then this conversation stops here and walk away.
Yes.
But I guess he got such a big stage.
But also the things that he says when he speaks louder are often things that trigger the person that he's speaking to. And then if you're triggered, you're going to engage, right? So, if we're talking and I just randomly scream dog 10 times, you're going to be like, what the hell? And just like walk away from this conversation. But if I say something that I've perfectly or almost perfectly calculated that I know is going to get you charged, then you're going to engage.
Do you think that he has such a big mind and thinks about what he says?
No, that's the point I'm trying to make. I think that subconsciously he's extremely. I do not think he's consciously doing it. I think that subconsciously he's mastered. He has definitely mastered the art of
pissing people off.
Yeah, and manipulating people and all sorts of things because he's the president of the United States. I mean, he spent his entire life figuring out how to get what he wants, to win at all costs. And part of that is being able to tell the story in the way that you want it to be heard, and to manipulate others, the story, the perception, all these things, facts.
Let me ask you one thing. There are some people, some actually, I think, are also on social media, basically showing that they just know so much. They're so skilled that they can make their money back if they would lose it. So like they could build up their own status from scratch, even if they didn't have. So some people say, you're only famous because people know you now, and then they're like, no, I'm gonna make like a faceless brand and I'll show you that it will grow as well, blah blah blah.
I think
Or-
Mr. Beast is a good example of, he said that, right?
He did it as well.
I think he said, oh yeah, he could make a YouTube channel that's worth
From scratch.
Yeah, from scratch.
Yeah, there are many people who do that. So there are people who are actually really, really good, competent, skilled, dedicated, disciplined, who can do that. Do you think if Donald Trump was stripped of his position and money, would he get back into this position or something similar even?
Yeah, and the reason that I say yes is because I heard this a while back. It was like the idea of what makes a millionaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone thinks you got $1 million or euros, whatever it may be. And it's like, well, no, not really, right? Because what makes, okay, we're talking about real, not people who've inherited their money or whatever, but like a real millionaire who's actually made $1 million of these things. What makes you a millionaire is the fact that you've gone through the trial and error process of living to become someone who has learnt enough lessons to eventually be worth $1 million.
Yeah.
So that everyone talks about how the first $1 million is the hardest to make. Once you've made 1 million, to turn that into 2 million is a lot easier. To turn that into 3 to 4 to 5, because then you already know what you are, the person who's made $1 million, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the exact same in this context, where if you've been able to talk your way into some situation or some position of power, especially a very high one, you've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy figuring out how to work with people and maybe manipulate people, whatever it may be, to get to where you are and what you want. Put it this way, no, I don't necessarily think that if like tomorrow he woke up as a no one, he would be able to work his way back up to being the president in 3 years or something. I mean, it's taken him, I don't know how long, right? But I think that indeed, like, you could very quickly shortcut a huge amount of...
I'm just like, I in general, I would say I agree, but for instance, Donald Trump inherited his money, most of it from his father.
Yeah, he did inherit a lot, yeah.
So like, where did he actually learn these things, except for, maybe the manipulation that he really knows, right? But
so maybe without going into too much detail on this topic,
I think he might get killed on the streets. Is what I'm saying. Like, I don't think he will make it.
Do you know of a YouTube guy called Johnny Harris?
No.
Johnny Harris is an interesting guy. I've watched him for a while. He does a YouTube. He used to work with Vox, I think, initially, and now he's got his own YouTube channel. He makes some really interesting videos. And he did a whole video on Donald Trump. So maybe I'll, if I remember, I'll link it to the description of this video, and people can go and watch. And there's a lot. I must say, Donald Trump's a very interesting character. I think it's also a very controversial topic. People are for or against Donald Trump, but I definitely think in general, I mean, this maybe not looking at the most extreme examples of like Donald Trump and Elon Musk, but even looking at like influential people in our own company that we interact with, that we know, I've definitely noticed that there's these people who have the skill with others. There's people who are able to really coordinate in a meeting with 10, especially when things are stressful and whatever. And it's definitely a skill. It's a skill that's been honed over time.
For sure.
And I feel like if they just immediately join another company in another position where no one knows them, they are able to still do that skill with a bunch of new stakeholders in a week, just after meeting them, you know what I mean? Because that's who they are. And that's powerful. That's valuable. That's something that I'm myself, and I think you as well, are probably working on every day, and we
working
don't
on to
realize it. Yeah.
But I think one of the key factors there is, and that's also something that Chris Voss taught me about negotiation. If you're like a cutthroat negotiator, you'll do fine in your one negotiation, but word travels and no one wants to deal with you anymore. And I think Trump is someone like that if something goes wrong, he will point you out and make sure that you will suffer for what you did wrong, and or he will cut you a deal that you will walk away from feeling bad.
Mm-hmm.
So like, he might benefit. I think he's like like really good example of a psychopath in that sense. Like, he only cares about the short-term win.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, if you don't have any money, if you don't have any power, why would people work with you in the future?
Mm-hmm.
In order to grow and really have people want to work with you, it needs to be a win-win.
Yes.
So you need to be fair. And I don't think that he's capable of doing that.
Well, if you want to talk about over time, I mean, clearly he's now at 60 something. He's the president of the United States for the second time in a row. So whatever his strategy is, like, it can't be that bad. And don't get me wrong, I don't think what he's done always is morally correct. I think most of the
Guys, I didn't know that Michael was a Trump supporter either. I'm just learning this right now.
Where's my red cap? But no, I definitely don't think he's a good person. I don't think he's a particularly happy person. I think he's someone who's got a lot of traumas that's probably unresolved and all these things. But I definitely think that he's someone who, if he has a mission, he's going to do everything in his power to get it. And I think a lot of his missions are maybe not the most pure or whatever. But hey, like you know, he is what he is, and Also, I do not know nearly enough about politics. Never mind Donald Trump himself to be someone to comment in depth on the topic. But
yeah, maybe that's true. I'm also not overly qualified to make any statements. It's just like
he's very controversial. I'll give it that. And
Yeah.
people love controversy because we're talking about him, and we're here in Eindhoven, and I'm a South African, and you're a Dutch person. Why the fuck do we care about Donald Trump?
Yeah.
But here we are talking about Donald Trump on YouTube, on his favorite thing, and the algorithm's probably going to promote this now because of
Nice.
Here we go.
Nice.
You
Thanks,
see.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, next we must talk about Uncle Elon.
Oh yeah.
And then,
I love to talk about Elon.
Teslas
Actually.
and
Very
Cybertrucks.
controversial as well.
He's South African, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I think did you know he's almost worth, I think, the entire GDP of South Africa now. His net worth, I think, is like 440 billion.
Jesus.
And I think the GDP of South Africa is 480 billion or something. I don't know. People probably fact check this, but probably not. No, but
No
one
one's
cares.
watching this
No
far.
one cares.
It's 40 minutes in, Mike.
There's like one person.
It's my mom, maybe.
Yeah.
Not even
But,
my mom doesn't watch it.
Yeah, no. Maybe doing a quick 180 here on subjects and doing a topic change.
Sure.
You're in a good mood now recording, Tim. It's because you ate some food this evening.
Yes.
And maybe you can share with our viewers a bit of the journey that you're on.
Yeah, so how can we connect this maybe a bit is if you think about shadow work and dealing with internal drivers and more primordial motivations that we human beings have. One of them is, of course, the desire to eat. I'm going somewhere with this. Gluttony is, of course, like one of the 7 deadly sins. So overeating, overconsumption. And here we are in the holy month of Ramadan, where Muslims across the world fast between sunrise and sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And I am one of those, so I'm also fasting. It's the 3rd year that I'm doing it, and we're now on day 5, so that's the background.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we just ate before the podcast, and I feel great.
Yeah.
And it's a very nice experience because so you don't eat and you don't drink, and you realize so many things connected to that. So how much of a habit it is to eat and drink in set times. I realized it this morning when every time I wash my hands, I just take a sip of water as well, and then realize all of a sudden you can't. Then during lunch, when you eat with your colleagues, it's a social gathering as well. And then, of course, your actual physical needs, you feel like your energy, your focus is down, and you still need to do stuff during the day. You still need to work, of course.
Yes.
So there's a lot of ways in which it triggers you and makes you reflect on how you are. And then finally, towards the end, it's just you're in a different state of mind where you're very stable in energy level, but a bit low, and your focus is a bit more diverted. That it makes it actually also ideal to really just reflect on the beauty of life and the world and just be thankful, showing that gratitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can definitely feel your energy and I can feel your presence here tonight. I think your brain is now primed, that it's got some nutrients and some glucose to use up.
I didn't do any thinking all day. I'm just here like,
I mean, keeping it all for this podcast.
Yeah.
No, but that's amazing stuff. I wish you all the best on your journey this month, all your learnings and introspection. Also, obviously, getting closer with regards to your spirituality and your religion.
Yeah.
Also, a topic that we want to discuss more and more on this podcast.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Would you ever do a fast, Michael?
Yes, for sure. So, we were actually discussing this earlier. I definitely like to try just start off easy with like a 24-hour fast, and then maybe a few weeks later do like 48-hour, maybe a few weeks after that 72-hour, and really build it up to a fast. Mine would be just the idea of doing something difficult. Recently, this past weekend, I learned about Wim Hof and the Wim Hof method. So I'd been doing some cold therapy since the beginning of the year, thanks to the man Sizwe for the tips, and that's mainly just to muscle recovery and the running that I've been doing. But also I learned in December when I was watching some podcasts about dopamine and the dopaminergic system, how cold plunges are a really good way to increase dopamine levels in a sustained way. So I've been doing that for a while, and obviously we know Wim Hof, the Iceman.
The Iceman, yeah.
Well, this past weekend I obviously learned that there's a lot more to his techniques. One being the breathing technique of Wim Hof. And anyone who's watching this, maybe we can make a short out of this and put this on the YouTube channel. But I have been absolutely blown away by the effectiveness and the impact that Wim Hof's breathing method had on me this week. I listened to his podcast a while back, and I didn't listen to much of it because I'll be dead honest, I thought he was a little bit of a crazy hippie and he sounded a bit ridiculous. But I listened to his whole podcast with Dario, the CEO, this Sunday, almost the whole podcast. And I've now done his breathing techniques 3 times since the weekend. And I feel so calm. I feel so at peace. I feel really amazing. I'm going to continue doing them.
Yeah.
And
it's a really powerful breathing technique. It's also very interesting. I think he found that breathing technique while he was doing cold plunges.
Indeed. So he says that was the start. And anyone who's done a proper cold plunge knows that immediately, and you submerge yourself, your body's reaction. So, yeah. And for me, I immediately realized when I started doing them, as soon as I could get my breath under control, I was in control.
You're good. Yeah.
And sort of linking back to why I mentioned Wim Hof is because one of the things he talks about is the idea of fasting and how important that is. But it goes a level deeper. And it's also something that I've resonated with myself. It's this idea of doing difficult things. But he puts it in a phrase, or he phrases it in a way, it's like going to the stress or the difficult times before they come to you.
Yeah.
So you go to the cold to put yourself through something, because he talks, and this makes sense to me, that humans, we're designed to be stressed, to be tested. If we look at our physiology and our history is the wrong word, our
ancestry or evolution. Yeah.
We have gone through a huge amount to be where you and I are sitting today.
Yeah.
And yet every day as people, and you and I are part of the system, we try and make everyone's lives easier, more comfortable, less difficult. But like Wim Hof talks about like really difficult physical exercise, pushing yourself on like a daily basis, going into cold baths or doing uncomfortable things, fasting, or I mean, for me, in a maybe more of a psychological way, having that difficult conversation, that uncomfortable conversation, or pushing myself to where I would normally be conflict avoidant to engage in conflict, or whatever it may be, right? But really like challenging ourselves as people in whatever way that manifests or calls to you, I think is really important. And that's a journey that I'm going to be on. And that's what you're doing as well through your spirituality and your religion this month. For sure.
And I think what you mentioned before is very interesting to come back to. I think in our evolution, in our existence as human beings, there have always been 2 ways to deal with difficult things happening to you or dangerous things. And that is becoming good at dealing with these different triggers, or creating an environment that avoids these difficulties. And I think both together are pretty good. What we've been focusing on now is just creating an environment that avoids these difficult things. So like the fridge is always full. There's water running from the tap. It's always the right temperature. You can sleep whenever you want. You can avoid difficult conversations if you want. So, and I think that's probably where the biology part of our existence is like not catching up with our biology is just not made for this kind of situation. And then there's another thing that I wanted to mention, which is nice that you go into like cold plunge and fasting, for instance, because I realized just like if you have exercise, there are different like like gym exercises. There are different stressors or curves of stress that some might be very hard in the fully stretched position, and some might be very hard in the fully contracted position. Similarly, I thought about, for instance, cold plunges and sauna.
Yes.
A cold plunge, at least from my experience, is very cold and it's very hard in the beginning, but if you're in it, it kind of like you can stay in longer. At a certain point, you start shivering and you shouldn't anymore. But once you're in and you've passed a certain point, you can stay as long as you want, basically. Whereas if you go into the sauna, it starts easy, but it gets harder the longer you stay. So you have these different curves of difficulty also that make it very interesting to try out different things. And same goes for fasting. Again, has a very different curve that in the beginning you feel nothing. First few hours is normal. Then you get hungry because your insulin drops. Then you get over it. Then you're good again. And then later it becomes hard again when you're really depleted. So like these things, they're nice challenges because you really get like confronted with different like tension.
Stimulus are different. Yeah. And that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it makes sense because once again, looking at humans and our physiology and our story, our ancestry, our evolution, we were challenged in every possible way. And something that I was thinking about today in the cold plunge when I was doing it this morning is I thought how there's a saying, maybe also relating a little bit back to spirituality. When people think of the idea of God, I don't know the exact saying, but it goes something along the lines of God will only test you in ways that he knows you're capable of accepting.
Yeah.
And what I realized is by going through the sauna this morning is like by making yourself stronger, it's a great thing that you're making yourself stronger, but you're also making yourself more open for more difficult tests.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't necessarily mean that life is going to get easier. It means that you're going to get bigger challenges, but you're going to be able to get through those challenges. It just means they're going to be more difficult. And I think you posted a reel on your Instagram, was it this week, where it said something along the lines of don't ask for an easier path, but for more courage
strength.
or more strength.
Yeah.
And that's so true. And it's easy to say when things are going okay in life. But when you're down and out, and it all happens to us, man, like there's moments where life just does life and you're at rock bottom. And a lot of things that happen to people are really unfair and are really out of people's control. And it's difficult and it's sad. And, you know, a lot of the time you want to take away other people's suffering. I think it's particularly sad when it's like children or animals or, you know, there's so much evil in this world. But it's also those experiences that shape character, that make you who you are. Which is, it's like that bittersweet. It's that duality, that yin and yang of life. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I always think about it a bit like that we are perhaps like the muscles of God. And that the same I have so many like things related to the gym. I'm sorry about that, but like
gym bro. This is what's it? The meditating meat stick.
Meditating meat stick. Yeah, gym bro exposed. Yeah. No, but like that. In the gym, you're breaking down your muscles, so you're completely breaking it down. Like cells are breaking down,
tearing
in order to grow back stronger, which is how you also can view life. So like the hardships that you face make you into the thing that you're supposed to become. So, and I also like these kind of quotes where people say like, I asked God to give me wisdom and he gave me challenges to face. So like it cannot be given. It's like the only way to become wise is to do a lot of stupid things and learn from them, basically. Right. So I feel like maybe that's the way.
And in the first episode of this podcast, we talked about the idea of doing and being. And we were saying, or at least one of the things I've thought about is, you know, how great would it be if we could just be in this world? Imagine being a hippie, meditating all day, every day, or whatever. And one of the things that I learned also through Jordan Peterson is that to live is to take on hardship.
Yeah.
Something bad will happen to you in your life. That is guaranteed. Our parents will unfortunately pass away at some point. Our friends or our family, people will get sick or something will happen. There will be a flood, there will be a storm, there will be a war, there'll be a, right? And so one of the goals of life is minimizing suffering, but preparing yourself for when these things happen. So just being the whole time and being zen and trying to avoid all stress and whatever isn't a long-term sustainable. You've got to be, but also through challenge and through taking on these challenges, which is doing, right? And so I think at least bit by bit, we're getting a little bit closer, understanding this relationship and balance between the doing and the being within the moment.
And actually, one thing that I already realized about the conversations that we have, the dialogue, is that even though there are ideas that we spoke about before, speaking about it in this setting, and maybe also over and over again, we're circling as well as Socrates did, and I'm finding more different perspectives as we speak.
Yes.
Literally. And I really enjoy that.
Yes. No, likewise. Exact same with me.
It's really nice.
Yeah. Well, I think that we should maybe leave it there for this evening.
Yep.
I think we ended
getting
up
a bit
recording,
emotional.
Yeah. quite a long episode. But I think the energy that we had this evening was great. Also, the probably dopamine in your brain from eating and feeling fueled, feeling ready to tackle some of these concepts.
For sure.
So thank you for the engaging conversation.
Thank you as well.
And next week we will have a pause because I'm on the slope skiing. So I'm hitting the mountains. But when I'm back, we will do another episode and we will continue on this amazing journey.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man.
Great stuff. Thank you, Tim. And
Thanks, Mike.
Clap here so we can sync at the beginning, at the end.
Ooh, nice.
For making it better.